Hey, welcome to the Cyber Savvy Woman, where women business owners reclaim their power in the digital world. We shatter the myth that cybersecurity is too complex to master and transform protection strategies into clear, actionable guidance. This is your digital empowerment sanctuary, where cyber fear becomes cyber confidence. Whether you're protecting client trust as a therapist or safeguarding financial data as an advisor, you'll hear from women founders who've conquered digital challenges and security experts who speak your language. Every woman leading a business deserves to feel unshakable in her digital decisions, no matter her technical background. Are you ready to stop letting cybersecurity intimidate you and start letting it elevate you? Here's your host, Rachele Schainker.
Welcome back to the Cyber Savvy Woman, where we talk about practical ways women can protect themselves, their businesses, and their future in our increasingly digital world. I'm your host, Rachele Schainker, a Silicon Valley technologist and owner of the award-winning managed service provider, CMIT Solutions of San Mateo. Today, we're talking with Anthony Calleo, founder of Calleo EX, a culture and employee experience consultant who helps organizations build stronger teams, healthier workplaces, and more effective leadership. We'll explore how culture, technology, and leadership intersect and what women business leaders can learn about driving change, building trust, and making smarter decisions in a digital world. Anthony, welcome to the show.
No, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. For listeners meeting you for the first time, tell us about Calleo EX and what inspired you to start it.
It inspired me to start it. I started off as a learning and development professional,
Mm-hmm.
and then learned very early on in my career that we can create these beautiful, meaningful training experiences, but it's what's happening out there that really, really matters. And so I slowly but surely got more involved in culture and got involved in people and people operations, and really over time got into this sense of I wanted to be in the HR people space as an advocate for the employees, right? And not just shills for management, to be perfectly blunt. So I have had those really neat opportunities through various industries and companies, but really decided to go out on my own and apply what I've learned and actually just help organizations, or more importantly, teach organizations how to create workplaces where everyone wants to show up to every day.
Yeah, I like that. And so, pre-call conversation, you shared with me how this is your brainchild. What kind of companies do you love working with most? And who is it? Share with us about your ideal client.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So I definitely love working with founders. Founders are in a different place when it comes to culture, right? And scaling. So conversations that are usually around coaching and presence and just being, a supportive ear in that capacity. In the small to medium sized business space, I'm industry agnostic. It really is, for me, finding owners that are really interested in creating exceptional places to work, right? And for me, I look at it from two lenses. One, I believe you have a moral obligation to treat your people well if you have employees, but there's also a business imperative too.
Mm-hmm.
Happy employees means happy customers, both internal and external.
Yeah.
That's certainly not my original idea. There's a lot of people that talk about that, but I'm certainly a huge advocate for that. So, it's for small size, medium-sized businesses that are, either thinking about scaling or maybe feeling stuck,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not entirely sure why they're stuck. I guarantee you that there's something happening below the surface with culture and employee experience.
Yeah. And, you talk about helping organizations build their culture where their employees can bring their authentic selves. What does that actually look like in real life? How can employees show up or team members show up with their authentic self?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's really the environment that leadership or the owners create,
Mm-hmm.
right? That allow people to go in and not fear. I mean, many of us, I've certainly throughout my corporate career, particularly early on, would show up with a mask, right? So I would say not what I felt, but what I thought my leader or manager
Yeah.
wanted to hear, right? Or what my clients wanted to hear. And that gets incredibly exhausting. So when you have an environment where your employees can show up with no masks and just be their authentic selves, they're going to really prosper and shine, right? And so for me, it really starts with leadership and what are the intentions they're setting. What's the worst thing they'll tolerate, because that defines the bottom of their culture, right?
Right. Yeah, so I imagine that looks like, for me, when I think of that, it looks like a place where, is it more collaborative? Like, people can bring their ideas, their choices, what kinda works for them. It sounds like a very inviting environment as opposed to, "This is where you work, this is how you work, this is what you need to do," but more maybe open-ended.
No, indeed it does. And that's, great. Your question was like, well, how does it show up? Yeah, collaboration is sort of the side benefit of having that type of environment where people aren't afraid to speak up, in an environment where when leaders make suggestions, they don't become orders, right?
Right.
Which is, kind of the paradigm in a lot of organizations. And so it's yes, it opens up collaboration, it opens up participation, it opens up retention, it opens up all a number of things.
Yeah, I like that. When you work with technical teams, and have you seen how tech projects can maybe fail when sometimes people don't understand why something is changing? How do you handle that kind of change management with teams that are maybe more linear thinkers and want things to be happening in a certain way and don't understand why that change is happening?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like technology, any project, but technology projects in particular are like the ultimate change management, right?
Yes, yeah, agreed.
Because not only do you want to involve, the immediate team and maybe the leadership that you're reporting to, but you want to involve your end users into the process, right?
Right. Mhm.
So it is the ultimate change management. And I think, that's where I've seen a lot of technical things fail. And you hit it right on the head. The other thing I think with technical projects or any kind of technical initiative is we get so caught up on the technology and the button pressing, we don't get into what you mentioned, which is the why. Why does it work the way it works, right?
Yeah, right, right.
And then there's the whole, and I know we talked about this when we spoke a few weeks back, the whole build it and they will come, approach, which never.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's like, we know what you need and we're going to give it to you, right? That is not, that's not, forget about change management. At that point, you just need damage control.
Yeah, yeah. You really need to understand, because what I found, in my corporate career was that there were some, subject matter experts who had this knowledge tucked away in their head that they knew, some sequences or some things that happened to make other things happen, and it wasn't documented anywhere. And you really need to like pull that out. So getting them on board to, find out what the actual process is critical, and that's such a skill set. I find requirement gathering, change management, you really have to be a person who can pivot to who you're talking with. I'm assuming, what's kind of a trick or tool that you have to kind of help get everybody on board and pulling out those requirements?
Yeah, I'll answer that question with what I was thinking about
Yeah, sure.
when you were just speaking, which is very early on in my tenure at a bank that I was at. We were rolling out a major initiative. And so they had, the new guy who didn't have history go out and talk to some of the leaders. And, one leader just, without even me prompting him, one leader just literally just met him, turned to me and said, I'm not resistant to change.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really not. And I think he knew he was being labeled as being resistant to change. But he said, to your point, he goes, I know all these different processes and procedures that we currently have, and no one's come to me to ask, right? Because he was perceived as somebody who was resistant to change. So they didn't bother asking, because in their view, it's like, well, if we avoid him, we're going to avoid the resistance to change, which is really not right. So to answer your question, you have to ask all the stakeholders. And listen, you might 100% disagree with what they're saying, but at least you're hearing them out. And if you involve them in the process, and to your point from before, if they understand the why, they don't have to agree with the why. That's like a mistake, like where you have to get everybody on board and everyone's agreeing with the why.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you give them the respect of explaining to them, listen, this is what we designed and why we designed it and why it works the way it works. They might not agree with it, but at least you give them the impression of, at least you give them the respect and the input, and quite frankly, maybe learn a thing or two along the way. All right. And you involve them in the process. So really the trick is just ask all your key stakeholders. And I know like the number one enemy I think is not really, it's not bad intentions. It's really the enemy is usually time, right? We don't have time to do all the gathering and we don't have time to do all of this. Let me tell you something, and I know you know this as a technologist. If you don't spend that time up front, you're going to spend it elsewhere, right?
Yes. Yeah, in the back end.
Mitigating nightmares and headaches.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely true. Um, you've shared that your ideal engagement isn't necessarily a one-day leadership training. You do like digging into those real root causes. What does a great engagement look like for you? When you tell us when you work with a client, kind of talk us through what the process is.
Yeah, usually it's the number one is figuring out what the ground truth is, right? What's really happening in the organization. More often than not, when I meet with a client, what I'm hearing is really the symptoms of some larger issues that are happening. So it's really getting to the ground truth. And to answer your question of who's my ideal client, it's the ones that are willing to go there, the ones that are willing to, find out what the ground truth is. And you usually know that very early on in the process. Once you do the needs assessment, and listen, that could be for small teams. It could be, one-on-one conversations, and people are incredibly candid in those conversations, particularly when you have somebody from the outside coming in, or it could be, using platforms like Culture Amp or surveying for larger organizations. But once you gather that, what I call ground truth from different inputs, not just from surveys, when you're presenting that and reading it out, you know what kind of engagement it's going to be based on the defensiveness. More often than not, honestly, people initially start getting angry, and they get very extremely defensive. And if you can't get over that defensiveness, that's probably not a great engagement for me or anybody to be involved in, right? Because they just don't want to hear the ground truth.
Yeah. So once you kind of understand what the root cause is and you're developing a solution, do you stay with them all the way through to implementation, or sometimes are you just providing solutions for them, or how far does your engagement go with them?
I will stay with them solutions. And my thing is like, don't feed them a fish, teach them how to fish, right? So that's a big part of my engagement is building, as we learn together and co-create together, is building capacity, right? And then I can eventually move on. And maybe it means that they have to staff up and bring in some employee experience. Maybe it means they have to staff up, and upskill their current employees or current teams. Not all of them actually have full-fledged HR teams. Some of them is somebody else inside that company wearing that hat. But it's really leaving them in a good place, right?
Yeah.
Where they can continue to maintain is what. So I don't even like I kind of let the word help slip out, but I really love to teach organizations how to show up. Teach organizations and individuals how to show up the best version of themselves every day is really the way I focus on it. So to me, the ideal engagements, let's find out what the ground truth is, because if not, it's sort of that same thing with a technology project where you're doing the needs gathering, right? Like what's the business outcome? What are the business needs? How do the end users operate, right? Really putting yourself in the seat. Same thing, except we're pointing that inward.
Yeah. And so what is the biggest mistake a leader could make when they're trying to fix their culture? Like they know there's an issue, but they want to change it. What do you see when they like take a left turn and you're like, oh gosh, we should be going the other way?
The scope of involvement that it requires from them, right? And I was just talking to somebody the other day about this with like mergers and acquisitions, right? So you have like an M&A that happened, and usually it's like, months of closing the deal. And then they have, the C-suites have a really nice steak dinner, and then they throw it to their employees
Yeah.
to figure out how to merge the company, and then wonder why it goes bad because there's no leadership guiding it, right? I hear that all the time. And this is very similar where if if somebody like me comes in or anybody comes in, you've got to be an active participant in it. More importantly, your entire executive team, however big that is, has to be on board, right? It's super easy when you're rolling out initiatives to pick on some individual contributors and maybe manage them out because they're not on board. But are you doing that with your senior leadership? Are they, when we're presenting out the findings and everyone's nodding, are they saying something different when they leave the room, right? And so really the leadership really being involved and really committed to this is extremely important. If it's like, we need you to come in and fix this mess, like, no, we're going to fix it together. And if you're not willing to be there, great, I'll collect my check, right? But you're going to be surely disappointed because you need to walk the walk and talk the talk.
That's so true. Would you say most of the time they are on board, or have you had that experience where they just can't get involved? I mean, or do you vet it? Are you really good at vetting it? Maybe you're good at vetting it.
And I think that's just like when you're onboarding a client, you really know. And not your question, but my advice to anyone I ever talk to is, you know, we've all got bills to pay when it comes down to it, right? And we want our businesses to prosper.
Sure.
But if you wind up taking on a project that you're not aligned with, the amount of friction that you're going to wind up managing is not worth the money, right? So I don't like, I know I don't like to make that, I walk away from clients, statement.
Right, right. But maybe your radar goes up. Yeah.
Yeah, you find out very early on. You get a really good sense. Again, that defensiveness or that, how involved are they really? Like after the contract, while you're doing the contract, are they involved in that? Or they just after the initial conversation, do they throw it off to somebody to deal with? So there's really usually some really early tells to say, listen, this is just not going to be worth my time and aggravation.
Yeah. Do they come to you? What happens for me is a lot of times people will onboard after an issue. They had a hack or something happen. Do you does that happen for you also? Like they're coming to look to fix their culture or change their culture because they had an experience, like something kind of like caused, a wake up call? Or is it just general growth? They have a growth mindset, maybe.
Those are the ideal, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's like, hey, we've got a pretty decent culture and we're about to scale. Can you come help us? I'm like, yeah, let's go. Right. What it usually looks like is, hey, we're having an employee retention issue, or, we're having customer success or customer service issues, right? Because again, that's usually on, that's usually on the employee experience side. Misalignment amongst the sales team, which I see a lot, like, where sales, customer success, and marketing are not aligned. In fact, they're often competing silos. So those are all kind of symptomatic of larger cultural issues that are going on that are usually like, we need some help here. And look, what consultant doesn't want a long-time engagement, right? But I let them know up front, like, this is not going to be when somebody knocks on the door and says, to you, like, oh, we just need an app, or, oh, we just need some training. I'm like, okay. But, me taking your leadership on a retreat's not going to fix your overall culture, right? And so if you really want to solve for it, let's find out what's really happening, and then let me know how I can teach you to fix it.
Yeah, I like that. All right, we're going to pivot a little bit just to like how you use technology in your business. Share with us, what tools do you use? What's working for you? What's not working? What tools do you use in your business?
So I did what I think a lot of folks do, because I talked to a lot of fractional workers, consultants. I went and bought a bunch of tools, and then cleaned up my tech stack. Like, oh, that's cool. Let me buy that, and let me buy this. And next thing I know, I have all these subscriptions. So I use the Google Suite, right? That works for me. So all the tools that come with it. I also use Microsoft on social media platforms for getting my word out and thought leadership. But then for inside of companies, it really depends on the scale of the company. I know I mentioned survey, everything from a Survey Monkey to a Google form. So it really, I can implement any kind of tools. Culture Amp is another example that I gave before. So it really depends on, like, what I try really not to do is to say, this is my process and I'm going to sell it to you. Like, let me hear what you need. Let me hear what your business, what requirements are. Maybe I just come in to be a force multiplier, right? Where your team does most of the heavy lifting, and that usually looks a little bit better and a little bit more economic for a company to implement. But, I've used everything from, again, the Google Suite to SharePoint drives to, you name it, I've used it. Because I am a single shingle, I kind of do CRM light. So I don't really, leverage any big CRMs. Been involved in a lot of CRM implementations for sure. But my tech stack is pretty simple. So if I'm I'm working on somebody to launch a podcast, now I'm researching those kind of tools, right? So I pull in, I practiced what I preach was, okay, what are my business requirements and who am I trying to reach and what's the best tool to do that, right?
Yes, it's so critical. Never like I see so many times people come in with the solution first, and I'm like, why do you need that? Like, what are you actually, what are the requirements? Who's going to use it? How are you going to use it? We don't know if that's the right solution, but I think that's such a default where people want that shiny new tool or whatever and just think that it'll work for them, and it may not.
Yeah, shiny new tool, or they're bringing what they're comfortable with, right?
Yes, fair, yeah,
I see that in HR a lot where, HR leaders will bring in the last HRIS that they used, right? Because they were comfortable with it. Not because it's a perfect fit for that organization, just that, they know how the payroll works, they know how the benefits work, and it's and I get the less friction conversation, but again, the theme of what you and I have been talking about in a few of these, the friction that you're going to deal with later because you implemented something that's not right for that organization is simply just not going to be worth it. And then technology in and of itself is not the sole answer, right? If engagement's a problem, putting up a Slack channel in and of itself is not going to fix your engagement channel.
no, no, not at all. Yeah. So true. Um, Share with me how you use AI. You mentioned how ChatGPT was, you consider that tool a thought partner, which I thought was a great term. How do you use it day to day?
It went from essentially using it as Google because I didn't know any better to now doing some serious prompting. So it is as a single shingle, it is my, chief marketing officer. It is my chief ideation officer. I've actually gotten it, I've actually now understand and I've got it trained to the point where it pretty much knows my voice. So I'll have it write some content for me, or at least ideate and write some content. And then it's usually in a good enough spot where I just have to go in and do some editing, right? And I had this conversation with somebody literally yesterday where they were like, well, I don't want AI writing my stuff.
No.
I'm like, yeah, I don't want that either, right? It's like you have to teach it your voice, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you have to train it. And so as a consultant, it's just a huge force multiplier. It really is. And what I've done is I've taken all those years of corporate content that I have, right, that I'm allowed to use and share, and I've uploaded it, right, and now I can repurpose it new and fresh ways. And again, it's my content, right?
Yeah.
And I'm designing it. I mean, I am a big believer in, I'm a board member of the World Ethics Organization, right? So I am a big believer in AI ethics. So, if you wrote something that's like heavily AI assisted, say so, right? And to a lot of people's credit, I see in bottoms of articles or at the top of articles actually declaring that, right? But really, it's just so powerful. I just can't imagine how you couldn't be using it day in and day out, whether you're looking for clients, because what'll happen is, sometimes as expansive thinking as we try to be, sometimes, we'll do ourselves a little bit injustice. So even like if something like client acquisition, right? Like who's my ideal client? You might be a little bit narrowly focused. If you start using something like AI for thought leadership and saying, listen, this is who I do, this is what I do and who I do it for, who should I be targeting? Sometimes it can really open up and broaden your horizons. Wow, I didn't even really think about that. And quite honestly, I know some talent. I know and respect some really talented marketers and business strategists out there, but it can really be a really good partner for you if you learn how to do prompting and you use it, and you use it in that way.
Yes, and in a safe way. That's something that I see with my clients is helping them develop, the policies around AI, what data they can use, what platforms, to be using. Because I have seen some, quasi horror stories where, people are uploading bank statements for reconciliation, and it's, that's not great. So I think there is that balance of how an organization can use it and who's using it, how they're using it, because um, it does need to be monitored and guardrails put up.
For sure.
Earlier, or when we spoke earlier, you had some pretty interesting, we'll call them tech horror stories. What do you see, when you see something kind of gone wrong, or, it could be, is there a lesson for small businesses about maybe being compliant or not compliant? What do you see when you kind of step in sometimes and you uncover like something that's gone wild? Was it generally because there wasn't somebody watching it, or how do we kind of like look at those root causes? Like maybe there's some licensing issues.
Well, yeah, I know. And yeah, I know we spoke about that. We definitely spoke about the licensing issue one. Really, you know, one of my favorite phrases is fall in love with the problem, not the solution, right? So what are you trying to solve for? And the problem could be, we need a CRM system, right? It could, that could be, it could be anything, right? So, and understand really what your needs are, and then really understand what your budget is, right? I mean, something like, I mean, Salesforce is a tremendous tool. It has a huge ecosystem behind it. But for smaller businesses, it could be, and now they've got other solutions, but for smaller businesses, it could be a lot to implement, right? And so it's understanding like really what your budget is, why are you investing in what you're investing in, and using the tool. I mean, more often than not, if you implement something and no one's using it, you didn't do your due diligence, right? You didn't do your work. You didn't involve your people in it. So again, what are you trying to solve for is like number one. And more often than not now, like, I'm old enough to remember that more often than not, you had to have an application engineering team build something for you because the software didn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah.
More often than not, if you know what your key things are that you want to do, and I say that because not every software might do everything you need it to do, but what are those key things? Getting those understandings, and then making sure that you understand the licensing and also the compliance. Because if you want to roll something out and you really fall in love with a piece of software, and you've got 100 people in your company, but you can only afford 20 licenses, that's not your platform, right? Because you can wind up getting yourself in trouble. So, and then understand your compliance picture too. What industry are you in? What guardrails, do you have? Not everyone, smaller companies can't have a cybersecurity team, right? So, what guardrails are the partners that you're getting involved in? What guardrails are they doing with your security, right?
We do that a lot. We help our clients like do a vendor assessment, like how to look at them, how to evaluate, and how to track their vendors.
Yeah.
So they have a record of who their vendors are, how they vetted them, to make sure they're good to go.
And I got to say, and I know that is a tremendous service, right? Because not everyone can have a cybersecurity team. And quite honestly, if you try to do it yourself, it can be very complicated if you're not a subject matter expert, right? So yeah, that's an incredible, that's an incredible capability to, make sure that you're bringing in the right partners.
Exactly, because I think I see a lot of times with small businesses, they kind of think they're too small, they don't need it, or they could do it themselves, and it's just really you need to find a partner because it's just too comprehensive now to try and do it yourself or figure it out and run your business. I see that a lot in the Bay Area, where business owners, they like to dabble in tech, they want to participate in that conversation, that, Google's next door, right? So they want to, even though they're selling insurance, they, an expert. And I did not anticipate that would be such a challenge in a way, coming from corporate, where you just know, okay, you have your IT, this is what you do. I didn't realize that the DIY business owners, how that was going to be such a competition. I mean, eventually they hear my messaging and they understand partnering, the benefit of it, but that was surprising to me.
And listen, you might not like, okay, I'm going to try to do this myself, right? Because, do it yourself kind of project. But, if you end up not getting the adoption that you want, or your employees aren't leveraging the tool to its full potential, or a myriad of things, your investment is really wasted, right? And and listen, employee experience, by the way, from my lens is the tools that your employees use, right? Now, I don't certainly dictate that. I would partner with the businesses and the IT departments to figure that out. But like those interfaces and that friction that they have with applications day in and day out, like that's all part of your employee experience, right?
Oh, just as important, I think. Yeah, if they have some, legacy software that doesn't work or takes 20 minutes to load, that really is challenging, and they may need to invest and move to the cloud or something. Yeah, we kind of start there with our clients. We look at like, okay, what tools are you using? What AI is inside of those tools? Instead of getting another agentic, building agents, it's like, what are you currently using? Because every application right now is pushing out some sort of AI solution inside of it. So maybe there's already something there that can help you automate these transactions, or do something. So we kind of start there before we try and put another layer on top. I mean, sometimes you need to, but that has seemed to keep people occupied, just playing inside of their own applications to see what's there. Um, if a business owner is listening today and wants to build that stronger culture and smarter relationship with technology, where would you suggest they start, or what's like a first step they could take?
Reach out to Calleo EX.
Okay, there you go. I love it. Yes. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Um, I think it's really have a conversation with your employees, right? Not that, just like you, I think as, in the technology space, you don't expect everyone to have the technology answers, right? I mean, that's your expertise, but like have some sort of a semblance of like, in your case, what are your business requirements? What are you ultimately hoping to get? Do you understand who the customers are or the people that are going to be using your systems? Like having that basic information would be super helpful. So have that conversation with your team, however big it is, right? Like, what are some of the frustrations? What are some of the obstacles? I'm telling you, like your individual contributors, the folks that are on the ground, they know what's going on, right? Now, whether they're free to speak up about it is a whole other thing. But it really takes a willingness to, say, first of all, as a leader of an organization or an owner of a company, how am I showing up every day, right? Because that has an effect on my team, right? And ultimately, I think it has an effect on what you bring home at night too, right? Because you're coming in and you're managing friction all day, and then you're coming home and you're bringing that energy home. So I really think it's taking stock of, hey, you know what? I think we have a problem or a challenge or an opportunity here, right? And then can we solve for this internally, right? And can we really solve for it internally? And if not, then reach out to a you or a me and have a conversation.
I like that. I like that. First, having an internal conversation and just realizing that bringing before you bring in, if you have to bring in someone, because sometimes I've seen where all of a sudden there's someone there to help and the people on the ground are like, what? Like they didn't have a chance. So I like that idea of having some internal conversations first and seeing, laying that out, because that will definitely get buy-in, and it's a good idea.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about it, it's just another change management element too,
Yes.
of involving the people early to say, listen, I'm recognizing that there's a challenge here. I'm thinking about maybe bringing some help in, or even before that. You don't even need to say that. I'm seeing some challenges here. Let's talk. Do you feel comfortable talking to me about it? And you'll get a sense as the scope of, man, I really need help, right? My people aren't willing to open up. I do need somebody to come in here and support me.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Okay. All right, Anthony. So at the end of our podcast, we do a quick little lightning round where I ask you a couple of quick little questions. Do you use an Apple or a PC?
Both.
Both. Okay. And then a phone or a tablet? What's your preference?
Phone.
Okay. And do you think AI is overhyped or underutilized?
I think, oh man, I'm going to say underutilized. I was going to ask, I'm going to give you other answers that you're not asking for. So underutilized.
Yeah. Okay. And what is one tech tool that you can't live without?
One tech tool that I can't live without. I would say, man, I don't want to say this, but I guess my phone, because I can do so much on it now. Like if I didn't have like if I lost my laptop, or either Windows or PC, I could still do a lot from my phone. I've got a lot of mobile version apps on it. So I would say my phone is kind of like, and it allows me to not be at my chained to my desk too.
Exactly. Yeah. Fair. And what is the biggest misconception about workplace culture?
The biggest misconception about workplace culture is that once you install it, you're done, right?
Ah, yeah.
You have to be the constant gardener, right? You've got to continually work on your culture, continually cultivate it. If not for anything else, employees come and go, generations come and go, right? And your culture is going to change as you bring new people in, or maybe your customers are changing, right? So that doesn't mean you have to, constantly engage in consulting for it, right? Once you have that healthy culture and you're getting that kind of constant feedback and you created those dialogues with your employees, your culture is going to constantly evolve. But it's not this thing where like, okay, we've installed your culture, see you later, right? It's just like software. It's going to require upgrades and reboots.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
all of that stuff.
Yeah. Keep that conversation going. What's the best leadership advice you've ever received?
The best leadership advice I ever received is basically showing up every day, being present, right? And so it's, if not, and again, that's the best advice. It's a bit complicated on how to achieve that. It requires a lot of inner work, quite frankly, but it's like making sure that you show up your authentic self every day and not coming to the office wearing a mask.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining me. I love how you bring a human culture first lens to technology and leadership. It's such a powerful reminder that tools don't fix businesses, people, clarity, and purpose do. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into the Cyber Savvy Woman, where we explore practical ways we can protect ourselves, our businesses, and our future in an increasingly digital world. To connect with Anthony Calleo and learn more about Calleo EX, check out the links in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, and share the show. And join us next time for more real conversations about technology, leadership, and living a more cyber savvy life. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you so much.
The Cyber Savvy Woman podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Hey, thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.